simply been reduced to rubber stamping most of this legislation, that even the expectation that you may add proper scrutiny or add some quality into whatever document comes from the executive, you're doing very little of that. In fact, if I may quote one of your colleagues who said that we shall not change or remove even a single comma or a full stop. That in itself indicates that whatever comes, you're simply relaying it outside. What do you say to that?
That is just political posturing, which people do out there. Actually, I think what Senator Cheruiyot meant, because he's the one who said that comment, is that we will conclude on this business in record time. But the truth of the matter, there is not one legislation, Fred, that has come to this House of Parliament in my term as majority leader from the office of the AG, from the AG's chambers, because that's where legislation from the national government comes from, and then I move it on the floor of the House, and left as is. All of them, they are minimum 10, 15 to 20 amendments on all these bills and on any matter. Talk about housing, talk about the social health insurance and all these other bills that you can think of. All of them, we work on them. The committee gets to conduct public hearings. They convince us as a house and say, this is a proposal from government, but we hold a different view. Or when certain stakeholders came, they were able to convince us that the better way to achieve what government wants is to do this. And we have always agreed with them. Therefore, those who are saying that we are rubber stamps are just perhaps not very keen on the work that we do, or probably don't understand legislation. Because the only way you would say that we are rubber stamps is if a bill comes in to Parliament and leaves as was when it was presented to us.
Yet we've seen a lot of this legislation encounter a lot of legal hurdles, which would have been resolved or remedied at the House level. That probably if a Senate or the National Assembly would have noticed some of these loopholes, probably the kind of legal hurdles.
No. You see, this is a problem. You know, lawmaking is not a very simple exercise. Because remember, you're making law for 40 million plus Kenyans. People have different views. People have different perspectives. There are different interests that you need to weave around. Therefore, anytime you have moved a particular legislation and you have agreed, when stakeholders come before you, chances are there are stakeholders who will disagree with a certain position, others will agree. Eventually, when as a stakeholder I appear before a parliamentary committee and I'm very insistent on a particular position, if that position doesn't find favor with the members of that committee and eventually on the floor of the House, then the next recourse, naturally as expected by our laws, is that you'll rush to the courts. And I do not agree with the jurisprudence that has been built over legislation that has been passed on the floor of the Houses. I think judges should exercise a lot of restraint before shooting down any legislation. Why do I say so? Article 2 of our Constitution, and even Article 1 as well, where people either exercise their powers directly or through their elected representatives. When Parliament sits to resolve on a particular matter, it is akin to the gathering of the entire nation. Once a legislation has gone through the Houses of Parliament, then when as a judge you go down and sit and consider that a certain petitioner has come before you, at what point or what position do you provide the platform for the other millions of Kenyans who through their representatives have voted in a particular way? Even if this piece of legislation defies the Constitution? I mean, how many times? And by the way, hardly do you find that that piece of legislation, many of these legislations that are being shut down by courts, are on account of constitutionalism. Many a times is on issues of position that, oh, you shouldn't do this because it's a certain, if it offends a certain principle, or very flimsy reason sometimes. In fact, many of the times, it's on account of public participation. And what do they mean about public participation? They say that you must demonstrate to us that people came, they gave their stakeholder views, and you consider them. Now, what is considering stakeholders? Does it mean that for every Kenyan or interested party that appears before us as a House of Parliament and takes a certain position on an issue, we are supposed to agree with them? It's not possible. There are some that we'll agree with,
Yes.
There are some that will hold a different view.
In the case of the affordable housing plan,
Yes.
The kind of hurdle it encountered, I think the courts mentioned the fact that there was discrimination.
Yes.
Yes, and by virtue of the fact that the Houses of Parliament brought in legislation
afterwards, yes,
it's seen as an admission
yes.
of failure in the first place to actually pinpoint that problem. That's the question I'm asking. That some of these issues pass through Parliament, you're not able to pick out the loopholes, then they end up in court.
I wouldn't know what was the wisdom of the National Assembly in anchoring the affordable housing plan in the finance bill. Maybe the thinking, and this is what I heard because I followed the debate when it appeared before the House, that given that this is a levies and taxes issue, then the legislation that covers all legislation across the country is a